consul then turned his horse towards the enemy and uttered the following imprecation. I carry before me terror and rout, and carnage and blood, and the wrath of all the gods,
yo,
and below.
Yo.
The standards, the
You know, I was supposed to do this a long time ago.
It is a cool summer morning on the slopes of the Apennine Mountains. On the shores of the River Tiber, the bustling town of Tifernum awoke to the noise of the carpenter and his apprentices as they started work on a wealthy trader's veranda, bright and early. The local dressmaker hurried down the main street to her customer, used to hearing the usual catcalling by the baker and fishmonger. As the other tradesmen...
Bro, should I say this? Nah, I'm not gonna say that. Never mind.
...opened their shops, just outside the town, a Roman army was marching by, commanded by Fabius Maximus. Heading south towards Samnium, they advanced towards the narrow valley, just south of Tifernum. There, hidden in the hillside forest, an army of 25,000 Samnites had set a trap.
I've heard a bit about the Samnites. They were super influential. Something like that. Let's skip this part though. Ugh.
Rome's dominance over central Italy was not yet established. Etruria was not yet pacified, and a hostile Umbria could strike from the north.
Oh wow.
South, the Samnites held their own on the battlefield against the Romans and were far from being truly cowed. Equally warlike as the Romans, the Samnites continued to pursue imperialistic ambitions on the Italian Peninsula.
Bro, what in the world? It's so weird to see the Italian Peninsula freaking balkanized. Look at all these different kingdoms and states. I don't even know what to call them. Oh my goodness. It's impressive Rome to call this though.
However, they now faced a rejuvenated Rome. Having learned from their humbling in the Battle of Caudine Forks, the Romans spent years replacing their unwieldy phalanx by adopting the Samnite manipular formation. Furthermore, the recently built Appian Way provided logistical support and the ability to quickly respond at crisis points.
I heard the phalanx, that it was a coincidence that when Rome started to rise, the phalanx became obsolete because of a specific battle. I forgot what battle that was.
The seeds were sown for a third and final war. In 299, a coalition of raiders from Cisalpine and Transalpine Gaul invaded Etruria and were paid off by the Etruscans. The Romans used this as an opportunity to accuse the Etruscans of seeking to ally with the Gauls against Rome, and had in turn allied themselves with the Picentes. Consul Valerius, pretext in hand, moved into Etruria, destroying villages in an unsuccessful attempt to provoke the Etruscans into battle. Then, from the south, Lucanian envoys came seeking help from Rome. The Samnites attempted to form an alliance with them, but once negotiations broke down, Samnite armies marched into Lucania, inflicting several defeats and taking multiple towns. The Romans agreed to aid in the war, less so out of compassion for Lucania, and more out of fear of growing Samnite strength.
Yeah, geopolitics. Don't you love that? A balance of power. Don't you love that? The Third Samnite War begins.
The Romans committed to fighting a two-front war against the Samnites and Etruscans. However, the opening campaigns produced mixed results. Consul Scipio Barbatus, the great-grandfather of Scipio Africanus, fought a costly, indecisive battle near Volaterrae. But the Etruscan
great-grandfather, woo!
retreated, leaving the Faliscan district and the territories north of the Tiber open to Roman raids. Scipio's consular colleague, Fulvius Maximus Centumulus, was more successful, advancing into Samnium and achieving victory near Bovianum. He then
You know something that I like about Roman names is how, like, hilariously literal it is. Like, Fulvius Maximus. Bro, you can make so much jokes with that. Oh my goodness, bro. Like, I don't know Latin, but like, I don't know, man. Like, imagine someone like having like diarrhea or something, man. I don't even know what would you call that? Freaking Diarus Maximus or something like that. But like, you see my point though. You could just make so much jokes of that.
Both this city
I'm shocked no one has not.
It is possible that the Samnite forces in the vicinity were insufficient to hold off a full-scale invasion, having not expected the Romans to attack so soon, given their war with Etruria was ongoing. The Roman consular elections for 297 were the first elections to be held following the outbreak of war with the Samnites. Amidst rumors that the Etruscans and Samnites were raising huge armies, fittingly, the voting centuries unanimously chose Fabius Maximus Rullianus. He had been the most successful general of the Second Samnite War, winning as many as 16 battles against the Samnites, Etruscans, Umbrians, and Apulians. This was the original Fabius to win the cognomen Maximus. He was the great-grandfather of the Delayer, who would later fight Hannibal. Fabius, however, who was not a candidate for election, refused the proposal. He then relented on the condition that Decius Mus, another veteran of the Samnite Wars, who had been consul with Fabius in 308 BC, be elected as his colleague. Still early in 297, envoys came from several southern Etrurian cities with news that they wished to discuss peace. This meant that both Roman consuls could now turn their attention south. The Samnites learned of this and dispatched an army to protect their northern flank. Meanwhile, Fabius was on his way from Rome to take command of the army in Etruria and relieve Scipio, while Decius assumed command in Samnium instead of Fulvius. And he arrived just in time, for another army from Apulia was on its way to reinforce Samnium proper. But Decius intercepted and routed them at Maleventum, with 2,000 Apulians dead and many more captured. Meanwhile, Fabius was now ready and moving south with an army of 20,000 troops. As the 20,000-strong Roman army marched in a loose formation, it appeared they were unaware that a trap was set just south of the town of Tifernum. An army of 25,000 Samnites lay in wait, hidden in the thick hillside forest, ready to ambush the Romans as they passed through the narrow valley. But Fabius made sure to send advanced scout parties and had already detected the ambush. And now, he planned a trap of his own.
Hey, bruh. Yo. Damn, they're out. How in the world did they not see the scouts? What?
Several hours ago, he sent Scipio with a Hastati detachment on a flanking maneuver, tasking him with finding a way to the rear of the enemy. Meanwhile, Fabius pretended to be conducting a forced march, as if unaware of the ambush, making the Samnites believe that their plan was working. In doing so, he kept the Samnites strewn about the forest and out of formation, as the Romans gradually closed the distance. Once at Tifernum, the consul suddenly halted the column. He ordered the troops to form a square formation. The Samnite leadership that was closest to the Romans could see what was taking place, and had only then realized that they had lost the element of surprise. But their troops further south along the hillside could not see what was taking place at the entrance into the valley, and had no way of knowing that the plan failed.
Oh, so how is this?
The line.
Oh, Wait, how is this gonna
Then,
end?
ahead of the Roman column, Fabius led the square into the narrow valley.
Oh.
The Samnites, meanwhile, passed the word that the Romans prepared to give battle and ordered the troops to stand by. Knowing that there is no reason to keep hiding, Samnite officers hastily formed their men into battle lines along the hillside. As they moved down the road in formation, Roman troops could only catch glimpses of enemy soldiers amongst the trees, and had no way of knowing that the Samnites, in fact, outnumbered them. His column
okay.
Ever further.
Okay.
Suddenly, horns sounded off from either side of the narrow valley. An endless swell of battle cries reverberated as the Samnites advanced down the slopes to meet the Romans. Attacking from higher ground, the Samnites quickly took the initiative.
Okay.
Fabius had perhaps underestimated the numerical strength of the enemy.
Yeah.
And now his legions were trapped.
Yeah.
The square warded off attack after attack, but were slowly being squeezed inwards and forced out of shape. The Samnites were clearly getting the upper hand. Fabius pulled the Hastati from the line and reinforced them with his principes. He ordered them to break through the front of the enemy. The Romans gained some ground, but the Samnites put up a fierce resistance, eventually beating back Fabius's strike group. But then, from the rear appeared Scipio at the head of the Roman Hastati.
Yes!
Seeing the charging infantry, the troops from both sides mistakenly thought that this detachment heralded the arrival of the army of the other consul, Decius Mus, who was actually stationed several hundred kilometers to the south in Samnium. Nevertheless, the Roman morale soared, while that of the Samnites collapsed. Before Scipio could make contact, the Samnites lost their nerve and fled into the hills. Having been pressed from all sides, the badly shaken Romans were in no shape to pursue. So, with fairly low casualties, the Samnite army lived to fight another day. Following the encounter at Tifernum, Fabius continued his advance south unhindered. Meanwhile, Decius had camped at Maleventum, where he had previously defeated an Apulian army meant to reinforce the Samnites. The two consuls spent the next 5 months devastating Samnium and capturing several towns. However, no triumphs are recorded in the year 297 BC, so it is unlikely that they made any deep inroads into Samnium during this year. The Samnite army was on the back foot, but their numbers were preserved. They were already regrouping to continue the war. Embassies were sent to Etruria.
I actually read that. I just don't openly read it out loud.
Making an alliance. The Romans had the upper hand.
Bro, this is like so much more interesting than like broader Roman conflicts in the future. Just my personal opinion, bro. What in the world? Freaking hell. Yo, where do you find books on this, bro? Like, actually, where do you find books on this type of stuff, bro? Like, where do you find books on this type of stuff?
For now. After years of bitter conflict between Rome and the Samnites, the climactic battle of the Third Samnite War was about to take place. Upon its outcome rested the fate of Italy. Under the leadership of General
Wait, hold on a second. How far am I?
Ignatius,
Alrighty.
the alliance of
We got more time. We got more time.
Etruscans and Umbrians, arrayed upon the famous field of Sentinum. Across the field, consuls Decius Mus and Fabius Maximus observed this sizable host. They were clearly outnumbered. But then, according to legend, a galloping deer emerged onto the battlefield from the hillside forest, chased by a wolf. Amused by the spectacle, the Gallic contingent unleashed a few volleys of javelins and spears.
What?
Clearly, the two beasts alleviated some of the tension felt by the troops. The wolf ran to the side and away from danger, but the panicked deer turned towards the rain of projectiles. As it approached the Samnite battle line, it was slain by the troops from the Gallic contingent. Meanwhile, the Romans opened a way for the wolf to pass safely through their ranks, for the wolf was sacred to the god Mars. This was an occurrence of dire portent to their enemy. Encouraged by this sign, the Romans advanced.
That's cool. That's really, really cool. I'm not gonna lie. It really goes to show you how, like, back then, like, things were truly still, like, kind of wild. Like, there was still quite a wilderness. Now, like, 80% of the world is not like that anymore. It's only like 20% of the world is, like, actual, like, wilderness, I think. Most of the world isn't like that anymore, and you can't really witness something like that. Freaking hell. I'm shocked the wolf didn't try to attack him, probably because there was a whole bunch of people there. But that's still cool. Like, you would not be able to witness something like this today unless you go all the way into, like, Siberia, like deep into Siberia or Africa, right? Savannah, Africa. Like, that's actually quite a spectacle, frankly speaking. Really, really cool, honestly. It really does go to show you, like, how much we've kind of, you know, ruined the world.
The consuls for the year 296 BC were Appius Claudius and Lucius Volumus. Appius was an ambitious politician who, as censor, had constructed the Appian Way, as well as Rome's first aqueduct. Volumus, nicknamed the Violent, had won a war against the Salentini, and while fearsome towards the enemy, was loved by Roman soldiers for his friendliness and generous distribution of plunder.
Oh wow.
With new armies in tow, Appius marched to Etruria with 22,000 troops, while Volumus commanded some 25,000 into Samnium, where he joined Fabius and Decius, who were retained in the field for 6 months as proconsuls. The three armies proceeded to devastate the lands of Samnium. Gallius Ignatius, the head of the Variani, a leading clan of the Samnites, understood that coping against 3 Roman armies was not possible. At a council meeting with other clans,
I like that drip though.
It was decided.
Look at that uniform. That's a Samnite uniform. Oh wow, look at that drip. Oof. Immaculate drip, man. Ooh, look at that uniform.
They needed to cooperate closely with Rome's other enemies and divert Roman attention away from Samnium itself. Gallius was chosen to lead a major army beyond the frontiers. Commanders were further assigned to conduct a defensive war, whereby most of the remaining Samnite forces would be stationed behind the walls of their castles and strongholds. Seeking to join forces with the Etruscans, a people rich in money and manpower, Gallius's army marched north into Umbria. In Samnium, with no enemy army to oppose them, the Roman generals shifted their focus from ravaging the countryside to attacking walled positions, capturing several towns and cities over the coming months.
Bro, it's not looking good for Samnia.
The Etruscans had mustered an army and joined the Samnites under Gallius.
Oh wait, hold on. Let him cook. Let him cook.
And attempts were made to hire Gauls as auxiliaries. This coalition inflicted several defeats on Appius, who lost the confidence of his troops. Realizing the need to spread out Rome's forces, Consul Volumus ordered Fabius to march into Lucania, where he was to stamp out a pro-Samnite faction from fully forming. Decius was to remain in Samnium, while Volumus himself marched to Appius's assistance. Appius resented receiving help from his colleague, but under pressure from his own officers, he agreed to cooperate. Volumus challenged and engaged the Etruscans, and his reluctant colleague then followed suit, marching his army against the Samnites. The Samnites joined battle without waiting for Gellius, who was absent on a foraging expedition. The Roman armies drove back the enemy. Later in the battle, Gellius's cohorts arrived and briefly re-galvanized the coalition army.
Bro, this is probably like one of the most entertaining series I have thus far reacted to. I'm not even gonna lie. This is just so like, I don't even know what is the word I'm looking for. Oh my gosh, I don't even know, man. What is the word I'm looking for? It's just so intense already. It's like I don't even know like, who's gonna win or not.
But the Romans eventually forced the enemy from the battlefield and captured their camps. The coalition lost 6,900 dead and 2,120 captured. Back south, a newly raised Samnite army crossed the border and began a campaign of devastation in Campania. Volumus hurried to Samnium since the proconsulships of Fabius and Decius were about to expire. But upon learning of the raids in Campania, he diverted his army to intercept the Samnites. He caught up with them as they were crossing the Volturnus River. However, as the year 296 came to a close, fearful news reached the Romans of developments in the north. Gellius's defeat had led him to take his diplomatic efforts all the more seriously. He brought a powerful war band of Sannonian Gauls into the field as mercenaries. Further Umbrian cities also joined the alliance. Now, a grand coalition of Samnites, Etruscans, Gauls, and Umbrians had mustered their forces in Umbria.
Oh my gosh, Rome, what in the world did you do?
This caused great alarm in Rome.
This is...
At the start of 295 BC, Volumus was recalled to oversee the elections and advise on strategy. At his urging, the Centuriate Assembly elected Fabius as consul again, merely a year after he held office. Ignoring the drawing of lots in assigning the fields of command, the Senate and Assembly decreed that Fabius should command in the north against the Samnite coalition, on the back of his successes against the Etruscans and Umbrians during the Second Samnite War. The Assembly also wished to re-elect the currently serving consul, Volumus, but this was near unprecedented. At any rate, Fabius prevented this, again requesting Decius as his colleague, citing their harmonious relationship. But just as Fabius marched out towards Etruria with reinforcements, news reached him that a legion under the command of Scipio at Camerinum had been nearly wiped out by the Senones. Meanwhile, Decius was assigned command in Samnium. Two additional armies under Postumius Megellus and Fulvius Centumillus were posted west and north of Rome to protect against a possible attack on the city. The unprecedented number of armies and magistrates with Imperium operating in 296 and 295 was a novelty for the Romans, which reflects the threat posed by the coalition formed by the Samnites. Once in Etruria, Fabius took over the army of Appius near Clusium. Here he received reports of a much larger Samnite coalition force gathering in Umbria.
Bro, how big is this army, man?
Situation, Fabius...
I want to see this army hurry up and get put in action already. Yeah, leave, man.
Requested that Decius join him with his legions. Volumus's command was extended for a year as proconsul, and he made his way to Samnium with the 2nd and 4th legions.
You know what blows my mind about this period is the fact that they're able to they have all of this stuff recorded, all of this stuff written down. How in the world did they manage to keep these records? Because didn't the Romans in a later period of time, didn't they not know how Rome was like how Rome was in the early stages of its life? I'm pretty sure they didn't know anything, especially around when Rome went more to the east, the Byzantine Empire. They didn't know anything about freaking like how Rome began. They wanted to know, if I'm not wrong about that. And I'm pretty sure even then, let me see, when did Rome, the Western Roman Empire? No, yeah. I'm pretty sure the Western Romans, in a later point, they also didn't know anything about early Rome, if I'm not mistaken about that. But I'm 99% sure the Byzantine Romans, even though you shouldn't use the word Byzantine, I'm just using it to, explain, what I'm saying, basically. But all I'm saying is, how in the world did they even like manage to get records of this stuff in such detail? What in the world? Because the Etruscans, I remember the Etruscans did have influence on Rome, but we don't know anything about them. They're quite mysterious, actually. That's interesting. If you know any answers to this, that would be quite great. If you can answer that question for me, give me any details on that. Let's continue, shall we?
This was to deter the Samnites from reinforcing Gellius, and to encourage Gellius to send troops back to Samnium. A Samnite army attempted to block Volumus at Mount Tifernus, but the proconsul drove their force onto the mountain and assaulted their position.
I really like this artwork.
And routing the enemy, despite the difficulty of the terrain. Meanwhile, in the north, Decius joined Fabius, and the two consuls marched their legions to the area around Sentinum. Upon sighting the enemy army, Fabius and Decius were hesitant about advancing into the open plain. With the Samnite army nearly twice the size of their own, the two consuls had every reason to be concerned. However, they soon learned from three deserters that the experienced Samnites and Senones formed the front battle line. Their plan was to attack and pin down the Romans. Meanwhile, the Etruscans and Umbrians were to flank the Roman line and hit them in the rear.
Bro, no way. Deserters? Why would you desert? You have the advantage. I don't understand. Oh my gosh, dude. Oh my freaking gosh, dude. It's like if God wanted the Romans to win for real. Oh my goodness gracious me.
Wasting no time, the two consuls sent orders to the two smaller armies defending Rome, under Fulvius and Postumius, to march into Etruria and ravage the land as far as Clusium. This had the desired effect. The Etruscan soldiers at Sentinum refused to allow their homes to be plundered, and they departed for Etruria, taking the Umbrians with them.
Oh, wow.
With half of the coalition force absent,
wow, genius, genius.
Decius sent their cavalry to harass the enemy, while advancing with the rest of the army into position. In an attempt to provoke them into giving battle, the Roman cavalry launched probing attacks, sweeping across the Samnite battle line and unleashing their javelins. However, Gellius remained on the slope above the battlefield and would not commit his troops forward. He decided to wait for his allies to return.
Smart man.
But
he looks like a smart man.
Skirmishing, officers and troops within his army urged action, frustrated that they had to endure harassment from the Roman cavalry.
No, don't fall for it. Do not fall for it.
Armies decided to do battle.
Oh my goodness gracious me.
The Roman army consisted of four
I've reacted to so much stuff. I know how this is going to end.
Legions, and an even larger number of allied and Latin troops, including 2 large cavalry contingents and 1,000 hand-picked Campanian horsemen, renowned for their combat riding abilities. All told, Rome fielded some 38,000 men at Sentinum. The size of the coalition army is unknown, but it is described as being very large. It included Samnite cohorts.
Hold on a second. I'm pretty sure they had a good 100,000 based on the fact that the Romans knew that they were 100% outnumbered, I think.
Gallic.
I mean, like, the entire, like, not just the Samnites. I mean, like, the Etruscans and whatever the heck the other people were called.
Warrior
but
bands,
this, I don't know.
Samnite and Gallic cavalry, and a force of Gallic chariots in the rear. Considering
Ooh, chariots. I love chariots.
Left the field, it is safe to assume that the Samnite coalition was around 40,000 strong. Roman military
yeah, most likely.
Though on this day, Fabius erred on the side of caution, aware of the combat effectiveness of Samnite and Gallic warriors.
Yeah, bro.
Fabius advanced the 1st and 3rd legions, but restrained his men from charging the enemy. Decius, on the other hand, wanted to force a quick victory. He assumed command of his cavalry and ordered the 5th and 6th legions to keep pace with...
I know I'm pausing a lot, but I just can't help but just point out that those pictures of the Romans, it just looks so cool. It just looks so badass. Like, come on, look at Decius moves, bro. That pic goes so hard. Like, I saw that for a while, but I just had to point it out. Okay.
With the trotting horses. Once they closed the distance, the Roman left charged the Senonas. Knowing that the Gauls were themselves notorious for being aggressive in the opening clash, Decius urged the men to drive the enemy back, seeking to quickly take the wind out of them. Meanwhile, the Roman right came into contact with the Samnites. Fabius believed from experience that the Samnites, while vigorous in the initial clash, would wear themselves out over time, so he ordered his legionaries to take a defensive stance and draw out the conflict. All across the battlefield, a stubborn battle developed between the opposing infantry. However, impatient with the lack of progress, Decius personally led the charge of his cavalry against the Gallic horsemen. The Roman horse swept them aside.
Again, bro, you know, it's crazy because I talked about this before. You know, I used to think that when these battles were taking place, freaking people were just slicing and dicing, like, just relentlessly. But no, I actually came to recently find out that a lot of these battles in this time period, bro, a lot of these people were literally just standing there, like, right in front of each other, apparently, just looking at each other and just, like, hesitant to, you know, like, cut the other person down. So it was a game of chicken, quite frankly speaking. So, I mean, yeah, you're hearing the screams and all that stuff, but a lot of it, I mean, that's true, but a lot of these battles, probably most of them, for quite frankly speaking, was just people just you know, just doing that, just barely, like, moving their sword forward because A, they don't want to get cut down themselves, and B, you know, they're too afraid to, like, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I can see why this would take a long, like, super long time, quite frankly speaking, man.
And retaining their momentum, they crashed into the second line of Gallic cavalry. The push continued, but Decius failed to see the advancing Gallic chariots charging towards his
I want to see the chariots. Let me see.
His attack this far, the consul was now at risk of being cut off. The Roman cavalry on the left now came under heavy attack. Unaccustomed to the thunderous roar of chariot wheels, Roman horses became uncontrollable with fear. In a reckless panic, much of Decius's cavalry formation fell apart as the riders peeled off en masse and fled back towards the Roman side of the battlefield, with some crashing into their own infantry, throwing them into confusion.
Oh no.
The Senones now seized the initiative.
Uh-oh.
Gallic cavalry and chariots attacked the left flank of Decius's infantry.
Oh.
The Gallic infantry, seeing the Romans lose morale, renewed their attacks, refusing to give the legionaries a moment to restore order. Decius tried to stop the fleeing men and rally the troops, but at this point his army was at risk of collapse. With a look of determination, Decius took it upon himself to restore morale through the ultimate sacrifice, the devotio, an act of ritualistic suicide in which a Roman general would fall to the enemy, dedicating his own life and the lives of his opponents to chthonic deities. As a battle raged around him, Decius remembered his father who died in 340 BC by committing devotio during a battle against the Latins. Now, as his son who wore his father's military garb, Decius determined to follow in his footsteps. He had the pontiff Livius recite the words of the devotio and transferred his authority to the priest. The consul then turned his horse towards the enemy and uttered the following imprecation: "I carry before me terror and rout, and carnage and blood, and the wrath of all the gods,
yo,
and below.
Yo.
The standards, the armor, and the weapons of the enemy with dire and manifold death. And the place of my destruction shall witness the destruction of the Gauls and Samnites."
Hey, yo. You can't see it, but I have goosebumps on my skin, bro. I have goosebumps on my skin. I literally have goosebumps on my skin. Oh my goodness.
With these words, Decius charged the Senones where their formation was most dense. Upon impact, he fell to a shower of missiles and swords. Witnessing this, Livius turned to the troops to advertise the consul's sacrifice, which inspired Decius's army to remain in the field.
Oh, okay. Is it gonna be in vain?
The cool-headed leadership of Fabius, who had sensibly kept reserves on standby under Scipio and Marcius. Although not yet aware of his colleague's death, Fabius could see that there was trouble on the left, and so he ordered half of the reserves to reinforce that part of the battle line. Seeing the approaching reserves brought new courage to the Roman left and forced the Senones onto the defensive.
Wait, you telling me that my boy died for nothing?
As the Senones formed a shield wall...
Wait, he died for nothing? Like... Because I saw the reserves there. And I'm like... Surely those reserves are just gonna stop the collapse, right? Right? I'm pretty sure him sacrificing himself might have been a bit extra. I don't think he would have need to done that.
He gathered the javelins lying on the ground between the two forces and threw them at the enemy.
Smart.
Showing still more tactical preparedness, Fabius had avoided overcommitting his cavalry. While part of his cavalry cautiously skirmished with the Samnite horsemen, another part had been kept in reserve. Fabius could now see that his defensive approach wore down the enemy. The Samnites had exhausted themselves, while the Roman legionaries still had energy and were eager to attack. Fabius ordered his embattled cavalry in the front to renew their push against the mounted Samnites, and his infantry to press forward and steadily dislodge the enemy. Seeing that the Samnites now offered weak resistance, the consul gave the signal to his cavalry reserve to sweep around and strike the Samnite flank, while ordering his remaining infantry reserves to reinforce his front line.
I really don't know who's going to win this. It just looks so balanced.
Themselves hard pressed by the general Roman advance. Exhausted, they routed. Maintaining momentum, Fabius directed the Principes of the Third Legion to turn and assault the left flank of the Gallic line. Finally, he activated the Campanian horse, sending them to ride behind the Senones and attack their rear. Despite being flanked from the north, the Gallic infantry resisted vigorously. But
yeah, man, those Gauls, yo, Gallic people.
Eventually they were overpowered and forced to retreat. The fleeing soldiers were cut down as they tried to reach the Samnite camp. Men clustered as they approached the gates. Those who could not enter resolved to fight a last stand under the rampart. There they were cut down, among them General Gellius as well. Many Gallic fugitives were trampled by their fleeing comrades. By the end of the day, the Samnite camp was captured. The Battle of Sentinum was...
Yo, I think this is probably one of like the most, like, courageous, very, like, both sides really had it in them. Both sides could have won this battle. Quite frankly speaking, this is one of the most balanced battles that I've seen. Both sides really had the courage, bravery, skills. I mean, this is actually quite entertaining to watch, quite nice to watch. Wow, that's quite splendid, honestly.
Particularly bloody affair. Decius and Gellius lay dead, and although only 1,700 of Fabius's men had been killed, Decius's army lost 7,000. However, the coalition's casualties were far worse, with 25,000 killed and 8,000 captured. Fabius gave a funeral for Decius and burnt part of the spoils as a sacrifice to Jupiter Victor. The Roman victory was soon followed by further...
I know this is before Jesus came, but this is like, what, 296 BC? Yeah, it's another reason why, like, Jesus had to come on Earth, because a lot of people worshipped a lot of gods, like a lot of false gods. Oh my goodness gracious me, man. So yeah, good note.
5,000 Samnite fugitives attempted to escape through the lands of the Paeoline, but they were intercepted by a local force and lost 1,000 men. Fulvius defeated...
Is this the end? Are we at the end?
Defeated a combined force of Etruscans
from
Clusium.
No, I think it's not.
Killing more than 3,000 of the enemy and capturing as many as 20 standards. Entering Etruria as well, Fabius slew 4,500.
Oh my gosh. Wait, hold on a second. I think I'm going to end it off here. Yeah, I'm going to end it off here. All right, you made it this far. If you made it all the way to the end, go subscribe, because you probably like my reactions. If you already subscribed, go like the video. If you're new and you do like my reactions, unironically, go suggest me some videos that you know I would definitely love reacting to. What the heck am I... Oh, go check out my other videos on my channel, man. Thank you for watching. And goodbye.